of Treasury webinars. Thrilled to host my second in a series of webinars in partnership with Avallone around the topic of KYC. Today's presentation is entitled AY and the Rising Tide of KYC in Treasury. We're really going to talk about why KYC deserves to be a priority in 2026. Along those lines, I just conducted a poll on LinkedIn and I asked folks if they're getting asked more information about suppliers and customers in their bank request, and the answer is yes. So those requests are getting more complicated. So thrilled to have with me today the CEO of Avallone, Meinert Jørgensen. See, I don't know, the name is probably bad, but hey, I do my best. So welcome to the webinar. And why don't you go ahead and give us just a little bit about your background and a little bit about Avallone, because we're going to be seeing in action how technology is empowering us to get our arms around this growing KYC animal that we have out there.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ernie, and thanks a lot for having me. So my name is Anders. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO. And before starting Avallone some 6 years ago now, I spent more than 20 years in banking, including as head of compliance in two of the largest Nordic banks. So you could say I've been part of creating the problem that a lot of treasurers experience these days by defining these KYC requirements going towards corporates. In any case, we started Avallone exactly for solving that problem. So how can we help multi-bank corporates, complex corporates and funds with responding to KYC, thereby which is really an efficiency thing, right? So how can we get it off the table faster, but actually also increase the quality in the replies and thereby, make the banks more comfortable and having access to financial products faster for these customers. We also built what we call KYC Collect, so also the ability to collect KYC and sanction screen counterparties, which we can get back to. But that's in essence kind of what we do.
No, thank you. Yeah, just to dovetail on this KYC and this sanction screening, I was educating myself a little bit, and I really didn't know how AI is changing that side of it. So companies are fraudulent companies, and so that compliance piece is more dicey than ever. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So just a little bit about our agenda, have a little bit of a hybrid approach today. So we're going to talk about high level KYC and Treasury, and then we'll talk about some KYC challenges. And first we'll focus a little bit more on what I'd say more traditional challenges. There are absolutely crazy challenges on the responder side. And then Anders is going to show us how leading technology is helping us really tackle those things. So we'll take a look at their KYC responder, and that's incredibly powerful in and of itself. And then we'll talk about why KYC is evolving. Where is this momentum coming from? Where is this counterparty perspective coming from? And then also, why is that not going to change? And we'll talk about how those issues change and are amplified. And then what we'll do is we'll have Anders jump back into the solution a little bit and let us see a little bit about the other modules there, maybe the KYC connector, and talk about that front. And then we'll go ahead and wrap things up with some key takeaways. So just to get everyone's arms around this role of KYC and Treasury, me and the light bulb kind of went on. So we're seeing that there are dimensions that aren't really talked about, in my opinion. So we're all kind of familiar with the responder part of it. So we have banks, obviously, but we're responding to requests in Treasury from our customers, our suppliers, and on the M&A front, but we're also needing to request the information, right, to assess the risk of our banks, of our customers, of our suppliers, and on the M&A front. And then we also are often, with legal sometimes, the owner of our information. So how do we know our own company? And so our board's asking us, what are your counterparty risks? So anything you want to add here, Anders, about these dimensions and how you've seen that focus change at all?
No, I think it's a good way of explaining it, and it's kind of been an underestimated increase in the burden over these last 5-6 years. We've been especially following this area. So I think 6 years ago it was mainly banks requesting KYC, and thereby the main receiver of the KYC. But now it's just across almost all categories, besides custom suppliers. You mentioned, law firms, auditors, bookkeepers, investors, just everyone is performing due diligence. So why is this happening? Because we it's not really fostering business. It's kind of an evil burden you need to get over, but it's definitely driven by the geopolitical uncertainty across the world. So
Right.
and that's really the sanction screening that's driving that increase. So
Yeah.
it's increasing, and it's continued to increase as we see it.
Yeah, I would say overall, I would say the financial health of our counterparties is more dynamic because our counterparties have exposure. So we have customers, and then they have supply chains, and then this geopolitical risk and this uncertainty, this impacts every company. So we don't know, managing that and understanding that financial health, but also communicating that as well, especially to the banks, so they don't start raising our rates on things. So they understand their risk, and they understand that we have control and understand. And like I mentioned earlier, the boards are getting hit with this stuff. We need to be prepared. You talk about getting the seat at the strategic table, right? You can explain to the board where these risks are, where they're coming. We are going to take this seat and earn it. So what happens? KYC, I hate it. It's a headache. Oh, that's the worst thing ever. Oh, wait a minute. This is going to drive your career and get you to the strategic table. So that's what I'm excited to show people about. All right, let's go ahead and get our first polling question here, just to level set a little bit and kind of put some tone around our conversation here. So I told you I had a little LinkedIn poll. So just asking you to share with us in which areas you are currently involved, Treasury is involved, your company is seeing. Is it providing information to banks and other counterparties? Are you requesting that? Are you on the requester side? So I'm going to go ahead and leave this polling question up for 30 seconds or so, and then we're going to go take a quick peek at the results. So please, everyone, go ahead and answer the poll. If you're interested in a certificate of attendance for the webinar, which I'm happy to provide you, you can use to help get recertification credits. You'll have to answer all our polling questions. So we'll go ahead and leave the polling question up, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take a quick peek at the results, and we'll see if there's anything interesting that stands out to myself or Anders. Want to remind or let everyone know we will be recording the webinar, so you'll be able to have access to that webinar. So it'll be on the Avallone website, maybe up on their YouTube channel as well. If you haven't been to the Avallone website, they have some incredible blogs. There's a lot of dimensions around. I find the ones that Sin does about financial crime prevention, especially scaring me straight a little bit. So I like to keep myself on those. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek. Thank you, everyone, for voting. I'll give you a few more seconds. I know we have the latency, so let's go ahead and all right. So perfect. Sometimes things align. Anders, I love to see information to banks and other counterparties because that's what's driving the attention that it deserves. So still 30%, providing information. Well, that overlaps obviously. So we are seeing a lot of providing information internally beyond Treasury, 15%. So I say that piece is probably going to go up, and that's where there's an opportunity. Anything strike you on these results at all, Anders?
No. As you say, it's spot on that it's information to banks and other counterparties. That's actually higher than banks only, right? So we can see this trend we talked about. And then I think what's also interesting is that typically people respond to where they sit. So if you sit in Treasury, you kind of know what's going on there, right? But there can actually be a lot of responding and collection going on outside in other departments, right? So maybe procurement are responding to customers, and sales are responding to one other. So legal is doing it as well. So you can have many departments that are actually involved in the work, but you don't see the totality of the burden in your own department.
What you just said just made myself think of a point that I haven't talked about enough yet, is that we need to have a comprehensive KYC program. So we're not doing this in silos. So we're sharing information. We're sharing the same information, consistent information. And now it's kind of a new one version of the truth, right? And that's kind of not a Treasury thing. That is our financial health thing and the efficiency there. So I like that. That's a whole different angle for us to explore. So thanks everyone for that. All right, let's go ahead and I got these. I have to confess, I've got some monitors going on here. All right. So I mentioned this. by poll, right? Providing information to banks. So only 51 votes, but still we're seeing, we're still seeing that momentum. So like Andrew said, we're going to continue to see that. So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to tee up, and if you want to copy the slides, let me know that as well. So just on a really high level, Anders, can you just kind of walk us through, just a few of the complications and pain points, and then also maybe you can touch on, are you seeing different conversations from your customers and potential customers? Are these complications getting more attention in certain areas? And then where is the complexity of these complications evolved over the past maybe 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so in terms of the complications, it's very much, we touched on it before, right? So the complexity of the requests are going up. Just the sheer complexity is going up in what the banks are sending out, but then also because you have these different counterparties requesting it, like suppliers and customers, that just drives zero standardization, because they, of course, your customers will ask about something entirely different than your bank and your suppliers and your law firm, whatever. So this thing that you have to be able to respond to any kind of request, that's really the complication. And why is that then so hard? Well, in essence, it's because we don't have any tools for it out there usually, right? So people have, emails, then maybe an Excel sheet they try to kind of figure out, and then some SharePoint folders, whatever they're using, which is natural because you kind of try to take together some sort of solution. And then you start to hunt for data to figure out, okay, I need a legal entity structure and legal. So they send you that, so you have that, and then you need 2 or 3 passports and utility bill and certificate of incorporation, and and then you start to fill out these questionnaires. So that's really what's driving the pain point for the customers. And I think so what's the conversations we have at the moment? It's very much evolved from being a pure efficiency. It's like, I want this off my table. I hate KYC, just get it done for me. To that's still definitely a big part of it, but to also be, hey, I wanna secure my banking infrastructure. I wanna secure that my suppliers and customers, they're comfortable with who I am. So as a company, so it's also coming in from this risk profile. So how can I actually secure that's maintained by simply providing the answers in time? And then, of course, data protection is taking up a lot of those conversations as well. Like, okay, because we're sharing more and more board members, executive members are starting to kind of ask those questions. Hey, who has a copy of my passport? Especially also as fraud is going up, right? So okay, that's a lot, right? So how do we secure that when I share this, we have an audit log on it? I know it's done in a secure way. I know there's a purpose for the share. So these kind of conversations are kind of driving the momentum. And the last thing I'll say is, to combine it all, we're starting to have more conversation on what we call proactive KYC, which is where multi-bank corporates say, hey, listen, I'm going crazy because this is hitting me all times a year. So now I will let my 10, 5, 7 core banks know, listen, we will send KYC to you in February, and we'll send you a big package that contains probably more than you ask for. But in this way, we know you have what you need, and we are super transparent about who we are as a company and what we do. That actually also lowers the burden and secures again your risk mitigation in terms of losing banks or losing or frozen accounts, etc.
Yeah, just a couple points. The first thing you mentioned, and I've experienced this, just trying to get passports and information from your executives is far from enjoyable. So you probably don't want to be doing that twice. And what if you're internally and you're the third person to ask the CEO for his passport? I don't think he's going to be actually baking a cake for you or anything. So we want to look at that. So before we jump into the responder side, I want you to share with us a little bit. I know you've been having ongoing conversations with the banks on the responder side. What do you think their appetite is to help, make things easier for clients? And where do you see that going anywhere in the next few years?
Yeah, but it's going in the right direction, so that's positive. Right. And I think the banks have matured over the last couple of years on on two ways. One way, first is they have now understood that they need multiple ways of getting KYC information. So you can't treat consumers and small businesses the same way as you treat, you know, a multi-bank, multinational, multi-billion enterprise. So they kind of understood, okay, we need a different distribution way or distant collection way from the corporates. What they also understood is that when some of the banks are building these portals, so you ask the customer, the corporate, to log in and provide the data. But if you have 10 banks, you go crazy, right? Because now you're starting to log into 10 different portals, and now we're back in the 90s where you were logging into different e-banking systems, right? And the last part, which is surprising that it's not been around for longer, but I think they finally understood how big a hindrance to customer satisfaction this is. And that's because over and over they've done customer satisfaction surveys with the large corporates. And what comes up on a top 3 is that, hey, what's reducing your satisfaction with the bank? And it's KYC, KYC, KYC. So now the corporate business guys in the banks are starting to say, hey guys, we need to find a way to solve this pain point for the customers, and not just look at it at, hey, this is how we want our data and you just deliver it in the way we want it, right? So I think it's really taking a positive turn over the years.
Right. So before we kind of dive in and let you show us a live look at the responder, why don't you just touch on a little bit about, I love this slide, about some of the guiding principles but that's beyond this module for us.
Yeah, I mean, a platform without data is kind of worthless, right? So you need your own data in there in order to be able to respond. And that's really the source of truth. You have one place where you know your own company, you know yourself, and this means you have your legal entity structure, you have your officers in there, you have also beneficial owners in there, and all those companies and data points that you would need to share. And this means that you don't have to hunt it here and there, but you actually have it in one place with also the connections. So how is the entity structure owned all the way down? And these views you can share. So now you don't have to ask someone from legal to design a new slide from you that you can then PDF and then send to the bank. It's simply in the platform and can be shared readily. And then the other thing, and this is really, we'll come back to the big promise of AI, but these questionnaires that are driving people crazy, right? You have to tell your address and your business model and your customers and suppliers and whatnot. This is really where large language models has a huge task and a huge benefit. So we can really see that when you have your data in there, then you can really deploy AI and large language models with very, very high output, which is then coming back to how can we get it off your table as fast as possible as a treasurer with even higher quality than if you did it yourself, right? That's kind of what we're seeing now in the combination of data and AI.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so, I mean, great points. I mean, I think the data is there, and then we need to make sure we are understanding how we're leveraging the AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor over to Anders, and we're going to go ahead and take a live look into the KYC responder solution. So looks good. So Anders, why don't you go ahead and just run us through a little bit on the solution front here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And this is really just be a sneak peek. I know it can be, devastatingly boring to sit and look at demos for longer. So what you're looking at is the platform in production. So here you would view your own legal entity structure, and these can be super sophisticated, these structures. And we have funds with more than 1,900 legal entities on the platform. So it's built for very high complexity. But for each company, that's where you have your profile. So this means that you can kind of see, okay, now I'm looking at my North American company, that might be the holding company, whatever, and I can see owners all the way up to UBOs with ownership percentages, and all of these views can be shared how you want it, right? So this is really where you have, coming back to the slide before, this is really where you have your data model with all your data points, with all the documents for each for the legal entity, and with all your officers. Okay, I know Joseph is our, or Erlich is our UBO and CFO, and you can see their roles. And this is where you kind of, from here, you collect documents such as passports, utility bills, etc., etc. And it all has expiration date. So you can kind of, you know when something is about to expire, and thereby the users get helping maintaining the data. That's the data structure. That's kind of, once it's there, you can leverage that, right?
Yeah, let me hop in here and put my Treasury hat on. So are folks using the data structure to also help them track like signatories, like internally, like their authorized signatories? Or they're using that, what we call, being the owner of the company data? As a Treasury person, I had not had access to all the signers, and I was chasing those around, and we have requests for, I can't remember the name, or international banking. So are people leveraging this on that front as well?
Yeah, they are. So because the data model is extremely agile, you can add additional data points. So if you need to have signature right holders in there, you can have that, and you can also mark that for each of the officers. But you can also have like intercompany agreements that you want to keep track of. So you can really use it as a legal entity management system and a corporate platform. But the beauty is just that everything you have in there, you can actually share to third parties outside the platform.
Yeah, awesome, thanks.
So what I really want to quickly show is actually the outcome of it. Okay, how does it help me as a treasurer? And that's really in the cases. So we're focusing on the responder here. So this is where you would have the cases coming in from the banks. Now, mind you, the banks are not on the platform. So they would either still email you through your normal email. You can create a case by just creating it in here, or you can simply just forward an email into the platform. It creates a case, or you can have the bank email straight into the platform, like at a bespoke email address, like incoming KYC at companyname.com, right? But the point is, once you have a case in here, the platform understands, okay, it's about this company. It could be several companies, but then the platform renders all the data that it has around on the platform, and you can start to build the package that you want to share with the bank. But before doing that, it's coming back to, hey, what is it that they're asking me? So you can go in and say, hey, the emails here, I got this email, there's a lot of stuff I need to do, I don't understand half of it, so let's deploy AI and just get some help with what are the tasks. Okay, these are the things I need to do, so I can create tasks out here, and then I can actually delegate that to a colleague, right? So this ability to get help and delegate things in the collaboration part is one part of it. The second part, and I mentioned before that the questionnaires is really the pain point, right? The second part is the questionnaire. So any questionnaire you just include in the email, you drag and drop up here, and that can be both highly complex questionnaires like coming from a bank. So this one, who are your customers, who are your suppliers, what are your ML policies? So here again, you can deploy AI and say, hey, listen, just help me out. Now, what the AI model does, it only looks into the platform that the customer has. So it only looks at your own policies, your own documents, the previous answers you've given to banks or others. So here it can say, hey, I suggest this is the name, you can just accept it, and it fills it out. So this is easy, right? Company name. But also like, what are the industries that your customers operate in? Hey, that looks good. And you can just continue down there. Even more complex questions like, what's your tolerance on bribery corruption? You can always go and see, hey, listen, where is this coming from? Okay, it's coming from our policy. So I'm just going to open that up and make sure that it's the right policy it's pulling it from. So it has source attribution, right? So this way you can get help with just filling these out. Even down to, I know this is a favorite for treasurers. So this question, what is the expected volume of dollar transaction on this specific account? Again, I have a proposal. Where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from the cash flow statement that I uploaded. So the platform is just pulling that single data point out, and I accept that. The other point I just wanted to show you, which is the more, I would call them ad hoc questionnaires. It's like just a PDF coming in. Again, you can upload that here. And then now we render the PDF live. So this is the true PDF as it looked that you uploaded. This is actually a real PDF from an insurance company, right? Again, here I can ask AI to say, hey, listen, just help me out. This takes a little bit longer because now the AI model has to understand the PDF, has to understand what's a question, where's the question, where do I put the answer? But look here, it's coming up with suggestion again from the platform only. It doesn't go outside the platform. I can simply bulk accept them all. It just takes them into the PDF. So I think right now I probably saved some treasurer, 30, 40 minutes maybe, and the quality is higher. So this is how we kind of combine the data structure and the rigor and the security of the platform with the AI models.
Interesting. Can you let me know? Sorry, this is exciting for me. How is it pulling in the emails? How is that? Is that an API, or how are you doing that piece of it?
You're simply just forwarding the email into the platform. So
Okay, right.
bank would email you, you can forward it in on a bespoke email,
Right.
or you can even create your own KYC email on your own domain and then tell your banks, listen, all that KYC, just send it to inbound KYC at companyname.com, right? And then it just comes in there. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that comes in mind, and I don't know if you guys have seen this just yet, but I would be looking to do this if I was a treasurer, like a responder. So when I was in Treasury, we had to report on our bank covenants. So I could also see treasurers using the KYC responder to have a template to respond to any information from the banks. You know, that could be part of your debt compliance, and also set intercompany loans. So there's like almost endless uses for this. Are you seeing any of those start to get traction yet?
Yeah, we do, because again, the AI model and the platform, it doesn't really care whether it's KYC or it's financial compliance and governance, or it's ESG or whatever it is. It could even be IT security related questions. The model is looking for, can I find a similar question in a similar context where the answer makes sense, right? So you're absolutely right. And the more, so when you start up with the platform, you put in your data, of course, and then you start to reply to the first questionnaire. So of course, now the platform will know less because, hey, all of these questions you haven't answered before. But the moment you answer those, then it already has, coverage on that, and you can actually start to suggest these answers.
Yeah. The other thing that just popped in my head was also, if you're trying to respond to an RFP for bank services, you get the same question, so you can have all that information out there as well. And that's another huge pain point that I see can be solved here.
Exactly. I think only the final part is just, once you create, so now you have your questionnaires finished, you have all your tasks ticked off, I've done what I need to do, and then you can simply just start to assemble the package. This is still done manually because we want the user to be in control of what's actually leaving the platform, right? So now the user can go in and say, yes, this is the right thing. This looks good. I'm going to include this one. They can even preview, so they have full control of all the data and the documents. We looked at earlier before. Hey, I want to just check out the passport. Yeah, it looks good. It's the right one. So even the legal entity structure. Hey, listen, I'm going to include all of them. So this way, it's the way I want it, right? And then when they are ready to share, they simply click create and share. So now they put in the email address of the person or persons in the bank and put in a message, and they can control the download limit. So what the bank receives, or whoever's receiving this package, is a secure link, and the link can be unlimited or single use. But if it's unlimited, you put a kill date on it. So say, hey, listen, after a week, it dies. And then the bank receives this link in an email coming from you as a company, branded with you, so they can even see that it's the Avallone platform behind, and then they go in and download the package. They have to download all the files for retention. But this also means that you as a treasury manager, you have full visibility on everything you ever shared from the platform, right? So you can simply go in and say, hey, listen, I just want to see what did I share with Deutsche Bank. Okay, just show me that package. You can bring that up. And here you can see the exact file structure of what the bank received. You can even go in and say, hey, just show me that entity structure I shared with them. Okay, I even signed it, looks good, right? So you have all that, and you can see exactly when was the links accessed and expired, and where the email received. I think I'm gonna quickly stop there in terms of showing off a little bit of the platform.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. That was incredible. And like I said, I'm sorry, I got my treasury hat on, so trying to tone down my excitement, but I just know all the hours and years that I wasted in there. So let's go. We touched on this a little bit, but just talking about the momentum behind the KYC to that counterparty perspective. Just wanted to share. I've done a couple surveys. One of them was about the impacts of the market dynamics. So just some of the momentum behind what's happening behind supply chains. So I've seen most companies have increased DSO, increased DPO. They're looking at suppliers in new countries, so that makes their compliance more difficult. So we've got managing your exposures is different. So if you're going to manage your exposures different, it's going to be harder to track those exposures. So we need to look at that. And then just overall, right, if you're manufacturing inventory companies, so just kind of to show that these dynamics are changing. So not only are our customers changing, our suppliers are changing. So we need to make sure we're on top of that financial health. And like I said, just interesting to see, unfortunately, to see what's going to happen next year. We have increased significantly DSO. So you have to be more in tune with managing your cash, but also doing that in a safe environment. And then we have DPO as well. So this is kind of just some information to help, drive that momentum side of it. And then just talk about, on the AI front. So maybe we'll touch on this a little bit. So your biggest concerns, right, for AI, and Anders did a great job of showing this on the responder side, how that can be incredibly powerful. And I think he did a great job on some of the security, right? We talked about data security, which you talked about, and lack of direct control over actions, right? And so the barriers to adoption. So any comments that you want to make where maybe these are common concerns of prospects and clients, and maybe the conversations that you have with them about kind of mitigating those concerns.
Yeah, and I think so it makes sense that the data security is on top, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because there's two aspects of the data security. There's one that, okay, if I start to use an AI model and the software provider, where does the data reside, right? But typically it resides the same place that the data you have in the email, on your Outlook, or whatever you're using of kind of household systems, right? As long as you use fairly large models and proven providers. So typically a common software provider would have their data, and thereby the customer's data, on Amazon Web Services out of Frankfurt, or wherever it's located, depending on your region, right? So I actually think the more important part is, hey, is the AI model being trained on the data, on my data that it has access to?
Yes. Right.
And the answer to that is no, because the moment you go into enterprise licenses, that you don't use it, your ChatGPT as a private consumer, but you have an enterprise license, it doesn't train on your data. So once we get into that conversation, it really doesn't take up that much space in the conversation. I think it's much more the number two, the lack of AI knowledge, that people have been playing around with it enough to be impressed, but they have a hard time finding hardcore use cases where, when they lean back and think about it, hey, I actually got value out of this. This actually helped me out, beyond taking meeting notes and creating a slide here and there, right? So I think now that kind of this huge initial wave is over, people are more looking for, okay, but show me some really hardcore large use cases where it makes sense, and where I can use it in a controlled environment.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I always tell people you can right size your investment in learning how AI works. And I told them it's coming in your solution. So just understand how it works. And when you did that, it was incredibly powerful. When you showed it's going out and it's looking for that and it's pulling that in, and you don't need to learn how to program Python to do that yourself, right? Then that's what I tell people: be patient, it's coming. And then let people that spend their lives doing this and doing it right help you with that. And that's just another risk, right? If you're doing AI, and you can get yourself in all kinds of trouble that we have enough things to worry about in Treasury, don't we?
Fully agree, right? And I think also, I won't call it a fad, because I think that's the famous last words for people saying, okay, this is just in fashion, right? But I think there is something where people have now realized that prompting is just not as easy as they thought, right? And that the other big thing is hallucination, right? That you can, if you use a normal model and starts to go all across the internet and search for suggestions, then suddenly you get super crazy answers sometimes, right? But you can actually, when you work with it in a professional way, limit those hallucinations by limiting the data it has access to, right? And thereby making sure it only looks into your own data, right?
Yeah. And we talked about the silo piece, and I think that I was talking to Treasurer just last week about this. So you may have people in the organization training AI on different data and asking it the same question, or using a different LLM and you don't know it. So you're going to get these, hallucinations. So having that comprehensive approach and having everybody in the room and having that consistency is incredibly important.
Yes.
In my mind. So before we kind of jump in a little bit to the collection side, just kind of give us a little bit of a snapshot of some of the different modules, and then maybe kind of touch on where are you going next, right? What is coming that is going to be a big impact maybe in 2026? That would be great.
Yeah, we already looked at the responder, which is a core part of the platform, right? The other one is we call it the collector, but it's really like how do you collect and sanction screen your counterparties, such as suppliers and customers. We'll come back to that, right? That's the two core parts of the module. But then knowing yourself is kind of the central part. We call it the hub, which is like, what's my own legal entity management structure? What are my data points? What are my documents? So you could actually use that even if you didn't have to share anything, just having that in one place where you visually can go and look and find stuff. That's kind of the core of the platform. Now, and all of these three core parts we are obviously developing on constantly, right? But the big things coming out next, obviously AI. We continue that route because we see super tangible results, and we see this use case that really resonates with our users, where they're like, yes, this is what I expected. This was the promise of AI, and I can see that delivering value. So actually, we talked about before, the moment you share your package in the responder, that you have to create the package yourself. We also want AI to do that, but still have the user to make that final, yes, I agree. This is what I want to share. So that constantly AI is this assistant. It's a wingman, wingwoman to you, that kind of prepares everything, but it's still a person, a human being that approves what you do. And that's kind of the principle we are gonna continue with. And then I think just segueing back to your question from before about the banks, we are seeing a lot of interest from the big global tier 1 banks in terms of, okay, there starts to be something happening here. You have a lot of happy customers. How can we kind of get into the other side of the platform and kind of join this exchange, both for the banks to get more high quality data faster, but also to push that higher customer satisfaction to their clients. So we talked about it before, Ernie, it's very few people love KYC, right? But if you can kind of actually make people hate it just a little bit less, it's really a win-win for treasurers and banks, right?
Yeah, I almost think that, to me, as a treasury professional, if I have a bank that's really getting into this, and let's say the tier 1 bank says, oh, I'm working with Avallone and we're doing this, and I can make it easy for you, then that's going to be a selling point for me. I'm like, oh, you have a commitment to this, so I'm going to have an incentive. I'm seeing more value from my bank. So I think that's something that we might start to see. So let me go ahead and let you take us into the other side. Take us into the collections and screenings, if you would. I'm going to go ahead and toss it back over to you, Anders, and then you can go ahead and hop in there, and then we'll spend a few minutes in there and see what's what. All right, all good. It looks great. Take it away.
So now we are kind of on the other side of the problem, right? You have some suppliers or customers or investors or whoever it is you need to collect from, and the collection is really, you're doing the same to them as the banks are doing to you, right? You have a questionnaire you need to fill out, you need some documents you want in there, and that's what you use the collector for. Now, the first part of it is that you have a number of counterparties. So here you would have all your suppliers, or you can have both suppliers and customers and partners and distributors, whatever you want in here. So there are many use cases, and this is actually why we so many times mention know your counterparty rather than know your customer, because know your customer is just too narrow word and explanation for what we're trying to achieve, right? But in here you would then have, let's just look at a supplier here, important supplier. Each of these suppliers have their own profile. So this is where you store your data, maintain your data on the suppliers, and it can contain all kinds of data points you want, so you can have a bespoke data model you can build yourself. It's super easy. But out of the box, of course, what do you need to know about one of your suppliers, basic information, address, tax information, etc., etc. You could also have all your documents. So if the supplier is delivering documents to you, you have them here in one place. And again, you can understand, hey, what's the entity structure of this supplier? Well, it's owned by Melinda Gates, and then we have some other companies and another UBO up here. So you really have an overview of this supplier. Now, on top, you can kind of see also some kind of steering metrics, like, is it approved? So are you comfortable trading with this supplier or customer, whoever it is? You can also have risk scoring, and thereby, is it a high risk or low risk? And thereby you can drive kind of how often do you want to follow up. And then especially important, the screening part. So this is kind of like, you do a lot of work to get to the screening part, which is like, okay, the supplier I'm trading with, maybe even all of the companies in between that company and the UBOs, and then the UBOs, so the owners, are they, sanction screened? Do they have adverse media? Are they politically exposed? So you can kind of see if that's okay. You can even go and say, hey, listen, just show me the results on the related parties and see how that's looking, right? And then finally, there's follow-up dates. So, hey, do I want to follow up in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years out, or do I even want to follow up at all? And that can, of course, also be set to the risk score you have. So this is really how you handle the risk and handle each of these counterparties in there. Now, how do you then get that data? You can, of course, both get it from what's available in public sources, but that's usually very low quality. So we always recommend, and that's kind of what the platform is built on, that you need to reach out to the supplier. So say, hey, listen, you're becoming a supplier with us. There's things you need to answer. You guys tried it before, right? And that outreach you can do here through requests. So simply reach out to these suppliers, vendors, whoever, and then ask them to deliver data into the platform. I'm not going to spend time on showing you how the outreach is done. I just want to show you how does it look like when the supplier gets an invitation. So they don't have to log into the platform. They don't have to be a customer of Avallone or whoever. They don't have to have a username. They simply get an email, again, coming from your domain branded with you, with what we call a magic link. When they click the link, they get to this kind of sharing portal. So here they can simply see, hey, it's important supplier. I need to upload my annual report. I just uploaded. Even if it's an existing supplier, you had it for years, you can actually say, hey, listen, you need to approve your certificate of incorporation. The platform shows, hey, this is the document we have. Is that okay, or do you want to replace it? So it makes it super easy for the supplier. And then again, back to the painful part. How do you get the supplier to fill out a questionnaire? So this would then be your questionnaire. You need your supplier to fill out. All data you already have is pre-filled. So how do we make people hate KYC a little bit less? Well, we do that by not asking them to write their address if they've been a customer or a supplier of yours for 10 years, right? So here they fill out all the things they need to fill out. They can even drag and drop documents in here. All of this is built bespoke to whatever your requirements is, of course. So it can be low complex, high complex. You can ask them to sign using DocuSign, whatever you want. And then it flows back into the platform I showed you here, and thereby back into the profile once you kind of accepted the data. So this is kind of like how you have a profile for each of them and how you can make sure they are sanction screened. And when I say sanction screened, their monitor is on, right? This means that if half a year from now they show up on a sanction list, you'll be notified, of course, in real time, and that means a 15-minute delay. And then how can you then also reach out to your counterparty and get that data? So that's kind of the core of a collection engine and tool used for these kind of use cases.
Are people starting to pull in, I would say, outside information related to suppliers? So maybe they have some credit monitoring service or something like that. Are people starting to pull those things in on that front at all yet?
Yeah, we're seeing that as well, that like, okay, how can we, because KYC is more, it's a financial crime prevention discipline, right? Where credit reports is a credit risk management discipline, right? But then again, you have one flow. So why do you want different processes in assessing your suppliers? So absolutely, and it can be hooked up also to other suppliers of that sort. So we don't have to build that ourselves, right? So again, it's broadening out to become general due diligence, or some would call it third-party risk management, right? So you can also ask questions around, what's your environmental stance or position on this and this, or you have to sign our code of conduct, or you have to sign this FATCA CRS tax affidavit, whatever it is. As again, the platform doesn't really care, right?
Right. Okay, thank you. That's incredibly helpful. Is there anything else you want to show us, or you want to go ahead and just jump back in to maybe some questions?
Yeah, no, I think this gives a good
Right.
overview and doesn't become too heavy on the demo side.
Yeah, agreed. And of course, if you want to have a custom demo, I'm sure they will be happy to do that as well. So let's go ahead and let's talk about. First of all, let's go ahead. I want to remind you, you can take your questions. I was remiss on that. So, okay, some questions from the audience here. So, are you seeing any industries where you're seeing more traction, or is it just more about the complexity of the company itself?
Yeah, I've had this question a couple of times, like what's the vertical, what's the industry that's progressing the most, and it's actually across the board. So to your point, it's more dependent on the company itself, but of course, high risk industries. So seen from the bank's point of view, are moving the most, right? And that's both on responder, because the banks are nervous about high risk, but thereby, because you're high risk, that drives your need to also collect from your counterparties. And high risk can be anything from, obviously also in the geopolitical situation, we have anything from weapons production, tobacco, stuff like that is really in focus by banks in general, right? NGOs as well, because they, in order to help, people and children across the world, you need to send money to very, very high risk regions, and thereby the banks are super nervous, but thereby also your inherent risk in the distribution of funds is very high. So that's definitely also something where we see more or less kind of a stable uptake and a stable or increasing uptake in the platform and in doing something about it, right? And then I think, yeah, but that's more fund industries always. The funds are always simply because of their complexity, and the regulation is becoming harder and harder on them, right? But that's kind of the three big ones, I would say.
Let me ask you this couple questions around this, and I'm adding my take on here as well. So let's, someone's seen the webinar and they're like, uh-oh, I need to do something. Maybe they're a little overwhelmed, or they don't know, how to get their arms around it. How would you suggest someone put that in a little bit of a box, or have the right conversations?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So, when you talk to a CEO of a software company, the first thing they're going to suggest is that you buy their software. But I'm actually not necessarily going to suggest that. I think before even buying software, I think there's something around process optimization. So on the responder side, sit down and figure out how big the problem. If you have less than 5 banks, most likely you don't need software. You just need a stronger process, and have a good SharePoint site where you have your data and your documents. Have an Excel sheet where you can reuse data. So I think that's kind of the first part. Just try and pull that rigor yourself. If you're complex, you have many banks, then I think it becomes a harder task. I think on the other side of collecting and sanction screening counterparties and suppliers, it's a little bit of a bigger beast to start with, and I think that can hold people back. But I actually think too often when we are going towards a change, we're trying to go from 0 to 100, right? And then because that move is so big, then people freeze and they don't do anything, right? I mean, just starting out by sending a questionnaire with 10 questions and asking for a few documents, and in some way setting up sanction screening, that's better than doing nothing. And then you can evolve from there. So I think, I've been in large banks for 20 years, and then now I run my own company, and that agility there, right? And what I really learned is that a lot of the delays in projects in large organizations is because we're not good enough to go agile and say, hey, listen, let's just go to step 1. It's gonna suck compared to step 100, right? But it's better than step 0, right? So I think it sounds stupid, but I think my best advice is get started on something scrappy, but better than zero, and then you'll learn, and then actually take it the right direction.
Yeah, I always tell people, they might not love it, but you're going to be asked about it. So you don't want to be flat-footed. So you might not have the answer, but you need to have the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a polling question here as we start to wrap up with our closing comments here. So just some key takeaways. First of all, I hope I made this clear. I firmly believe that KYC can get you a seat at the strategic table. From my surveys, what I've seen, I ask people what the role of Treasury is, right? And why are you being asked to the strategic table? The most common answer, risk management. So this is a great tool for you. But another thing we kind of touched on, and it makes the adoption better, but KYC matters and it requires a culture of compliance. So I think that's important. You can face that cultural barrier. Anything you want to add on that front, Anders? Do you run into that a lot?
Yeah, but I think I also in my past seen my share of money laundering incidents in the banks, right? And culture is always brought up as the big culprit. But I actually think that's a way too easy explanation. I think there are 4 things that needs to happen to move forward with any kind of compliance. And culture, of course, is one. You need to want to do it, right? But then also technology and resources, right? If you don't have people and time, if the treasury team is already strained and they're asked to do even more, it's not going to happen, right? If they don't have technology to support them, that's going to happen. And then the final thing I think is probably the most important part, that's competence. If you don't know anything about it, how do you if you can't even take a webinar, go on a course or get some help, then you're probably going to build a process that's not fit for purpose. So I think definitely culture is important, but I think all 4 of them is critical for achieving this.
Yeah, thank you for that. So also, I think we mentioned this, but just know that lens of KYC, it's going to KYCP. If it hasn't hit your company yet, it's coming. So there's nothing in my mind or in the world that we live in that I think that is going to change. And you just touched on this. We need education and training around not only KYC, but AI as well. So we know what we're doing. And then to me, look at the business case. It makes sense on so many levels. Just the time that it saves and having that one version, and it's a Christmas gift that keeps on giving, because you don't realize how many times you're asked for these questions. Also, the other pieces I didn't talk about. What about KYC from your auditors? Those are our good friends, internal auditors, external auditors. I don't want to be digging around in someone's file cabinet tracking a cash conversation or something when I can have it all in one place. And then the other thing which you also touched on is these types of solutions can facilitate collaboration. Wouldn't it be nice to have less friction with our banks and our counterparties, right? So you're working together. It's like, I have this information. They might want to know that about themselves, right? Maybe they're like, hey, what do you have? You can make it a win-win situation. And for me, it seems like KYC can be a competitive advantage in your industry, in your business. Knowing your risk, taking educated risk is where people really deliver growth in a dynamic environment. So Anders, I'm going to let you go ahead and before I do some closing comments, just a few closing thoughts you'd like to share with the audience for us.
Yeah, I think well, the bad news is it's getting worse, right? So I think one has to start to prepare for, okay, how regardless whether you use software or not, how do we actually start to handle this on both responding and collecting? And even if you don't think collecting from suppliers is necessary by now, you are going to be forced by the banks, because they are going to start to interest more and more. In the old days, we joked about know your customer's customer, seen from the bank's point of view, but that's here now. They are start to, because you use the bank to pay or receive payments from suppliers and customers, so that's why they're going to start to be interested in this. So I think the sooner you start having some sort of opinion on how you solve it, whether by optimizing processes or buying technology, the better. And then I think also just instead of we're kind of discussing these more, simple AI use cases, I think it's a huge win if you can bring, a super solid AI use case to the CFO's table and say, hey, listen here, I've done something about it. I can see meaningful reduction in time spent on these cases, which either leads to savings or it could lead to that your senior treasury people actually spend time on cash forecasting or whatever they wake up in the morning to do.
Great. Yeah. So thank you, Anders, for your great insights and giving us a look into your solution. Again, I want to let you know this is the second in our series of 3, so we'll have one more webinar in this fiscal year. But I also want to tell everyone, if you're going to AFP in Boston, we're going to be doing a live episode of Treasury Truth or Dare with Anders in their booth. A lot of exciting things going on. Now, part of the dares might involve an opportunity to maybe throw a pie at Ernie or something like that. So I want you to go to their booth. Actually, I believe you might be able to participate in a Lego building contest. So I've been working closely with Avallone and their team. It's going to be a place to have fun. And also, you're going to get to meet the Avallone team. They're coming to the US, so you can have these conversations face to face. So I'm really looking forward to that. And finally, to everyone on the podcast, I wish you the courage to live your Treasury truth, which should mean loving KYC, and be your very best at everything that you do within and beyond your Treasury life. Until next time, everyone, have an amazing rest of your day.